What's up, everybody? Um, Welcome back to Not Addicted. Today we are visiting step 8. And step 8 reads like this: that I choose to look through the lens of possibility and not probability. Now, I wanted to add this one into the steps because when you look at the addiction world and you look at treatment, it's primarily based on the probabilities of success, the probabilities. Treatment methods are essentially based on that. We'll get into all that. Let me go ahead and read this to you, what it specifically says. So it says that probability says that 95% of individuals who enter treatment will relapse within the first 2 years after completing. Probability says that it is common for people to relapse in their early recovery stage. Probability says that you won't change. Probability says only 1 out of 10 of you will make it. I know that that's a common one. People who go into these addiction circles often, whether it be an AA or an NA or it's a treatment center, that probability of only 1 out of 10 will make it is the one that I hear quite often, and the one that people are most familiar with. And interesting that actually comes from a real and true statistic that says that only 1 out of 10 addicts will actually go into treatment. So 10% of addicts will actually enter treatment. But possibility, on the other hand, says that these things don't have to be that way. Possibility says that you could not be one of the 95% that ultimately relapse in their first 2 years. Possibility says that you could change, and it could be one of the greatest changes of your life. Possibility says that you could be part of the 9 out of 10, not the 1 out of 10, who go to treatment. And we'll get into that number there. But ultimately, I don't think from the addict's perspective or from a treatment perspective, that we pay enough attention to possibilities. Again, the addiction world, the treatment world is really primarily focused on the probabilities of things. The treatment methods that are used are taken and based on the probabilities. They tell you that relapse is a common thing because, let's be honest, they expect you to do it, but say it under the guise of therapy and reducing your shame or your guilt about it. You'll have to think back to step 3 with this, because in step 3 I provide certain numbers, and I'm going to provide them again in case you missed them. But in step 3, I lay out for you that over 90% of individuals with addiction problems will eventually get over it. They will achieve lifetime remission. 90%. It's a far cry from the things we often hear, that addiction is it's jails, institutions, and death, and that's not true. The vast majority of addicts get over the problem, and they do so typically without any kind of treatment, hence the 1 out of 10 addicts. So you've got 90% of individuals who ultimately will get over it, but then you got 10% who struggle the most with the problem. And if I were to ask you, where do you think we derive all of our treatment methods, where we get all of our sayings, 95% recidivism rate, addiction is a lifelong struggle, it's a disease. If I were to have you guess, which one of those percentages do we get this information from? Do we study the most? And if you're sitting there saying, well, it's got to be the 90%, the majority of addicts who typically get over the problem is where we get all of our information from. Well, that's unfortunately not true. It's not true at all. The vast majority of the information that we get on addiction, and when you enter treatment, the methods that are used, the disease model, the disorder kind of approach, it primarily comes from 10% of addicts who ultimately enter treatment. And so it comes from the minority of individuals with addictions, where we get the ideas of like, this is a disease and you got all these triggers. And Kelly, would you calm down? Thank you. Jeez, it's my dog. She's over there. I don't know if anybody can see her. Kelly, hey, come here. Come here, pop your head up. There you go. Yeah. All right, but I'm making a video. Okay, yes, and you want to hang out. All right. You want to come up here? You want to come up on my lap? You can come up on my lap. Do you want to? Come on. No? Okay. Well, then you got to back up. You got to back up. Thank you. Dogs. Gotta love them. But anyway, so back to what we were talking about is that, the treatment methods, the disease model, all this talk about jails, institutions, and death, and disorder and everything else, this all comes from, again, the 10%, the minority of addicts. And to break down these numbers a little bit more, just to give you a clearer picture, in 2023, it was reported that there are about 46 million individuals in the United States who have been diagnosed or are currently struggling with a substance use disorder. 46 million. All right, 10% of that 46 million will eventually go to treatment. So does that mean that for the other, I'm not good at math, somebody can do that math, but for the other percentage, the 90 other percent who don't go to treatment, again, does that mean that they're just dying and that they're ODing and they're not getting over the problem? Well, no, not at all. That's not true. Because if you look at the overdose numbers for last year, the overdose numbers, while they are high, it was 107,000, all right, roughly. 107,000 overdoses out of 46 million addicts. Again, you're talking about the minority of individuals who struggle with this problem. Now, when you try to look at it, and I dare you to try to find any other business model that bases its methods of operation off the minority of individuals who more often than not fail at it and who struggle the most, then that 95% recidivism rate for treatment suddenly starts to make a lot of sense. And anyone else or any other kind of business, this would put you out of business. I mean, you're not successful at all. 5% of individuals who go to treatment get better, and that's 5% out of the 10% of actual addicts. Meanwhile, you got the other 90%, again, who according to the research are ultimately getting over this problem without any kind of treatment. A good example is this would be like, in a way, taking someone who has gotten the common cold and you go into the hospital, and because somebody got the cold before and they died from it, this means that everyone who gets a cold is probably going to die from it. And so when they go to the hospital for their treatment, they're going to get the medical book thrown at them. They're going to get the worst case scenario thrown at them, give them every treatment possible to keep them from dying. When any good and sound medical professional would say that everybody's different, and some people's immune systems are strong enough to fight this off on its own. And giving them all of this medical intervention would probably make the situation worse. It's called iatrogenesis, where the medicine has become the problem, not the thing it was meant to treat anymore. I feel like we're at a similar spot here with our addictions and the way that treatment's going. Is that treatment now, in certain cases, you could argue in most cases, treatment becomes the problem more so than the addiction ever was. Um, and that person may have been better off had they just let it run its course. Again, with fentanyl being introduced into the mix, you're obviously seeing an uptick in overdoses. But at the same time, last year you're talking about 107,000. Now, mind you, again, that is a lot, but I'm just asking you to put this into perspective of the whole. 107,000 out of 46 million. Again, it's not, in my mind at least, addiction, when you look at it from those numbers, from those standpoint, or from that standpoint, well, I got to be careful how I say this. I don't want to say it's not as big of a problem as we make it out to be, because it can be. It can very well be a huge problem. But at the same time, the idea that it ends in jails, institutions, and death for everybody is just simply not true. The data doesn't support it at all. And for more people than not, for 90%, they will go through it and they will do what is often called maturing out, or from things like SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Association, they call it just natural recovery. It's the person who one day just wakes up and says, you know what, I'm done. And, maybe they need a medical detox or something like that. But that is the extent to which they get treatment, as they go through a detox process. Again, that is the majority of addicts, all right? Not this whole, go to treatment, follow it up for the rest of your life because you got this disease. Again, the majority of addicts just simply don't believe that stuff. But in my opinion, no one changes themselves in any meaningful way with the idea that they're probably going to fail. And this is what those probabilities that we talked about, that's the mentality that it produces. We have to understand that motivation for change is rooted always in the possibilities of that change. I think that discussion of disease, discussion of disorder is a distraction for somebody figuring out that, or for somebody getting to a point of where they believe that changing this problem opens up many more possibilities for them. Under the language of disease, the addict really believes that they can only cope with their life and cope with this problem, even if they stop, and they can never go about living anymore. It's just about coping, not about living. Again, under those ideas, no wonder why they often return to using. No wonder why 95% of people go to treatment and then return to using if, again, all they believe is they just can cope with life and not actually live. But we need to look more at possibility here, because that is the mentality, what I just described is the mentality that is produced when you're looking at all of these probabilities. But we need to look at possibilities. Possibility is something that needs to be taken advantage of, and uncertainty should be considered a blessing for the addict. The idea that your life tomorrow may not be the same as your life today, and that's the same for everybody. So if your circumstances are terrible today, well, possibility and uncertainty says that it could be totally different tomorrow. Or in a more realistic sense, it could be totally different in about a year's time, depending on what you do and the actions that you decide to take. So we need to open up to this idea. And it's especially difficult for individuals when, for instance, legal troubles have mounted, when relationships have been broken, and they believe that they're just totally diseased and totally disordered. Again, to me, it's not a mystery then that an individual who believes those things ultimately returns to substance using. I don't think that's a mystery to anybody. I wouldn't pursue a new job if I thought I'd fail at it. I wouldn't pursue a new I don't know, I wouldn't get a new car if I thought that the moment I drive it off the lot it's just going to die. Uh, I need to believe that I've got something better here and I've got something better to do. I've got all these endless possibilities now for my life. You see, in my mind, addicts are not diseased, they are conflicted. And confliction, if anything, is the disease. And they're conflicted between the idea that their life could be better or their life could only get much worse. So again, without the belief in a possibility or in the possibility of a better life or better results, no one would decide to change anything. No one would decide to change a behavior. I don't understand why some people, treatment professionals in particular, don't see the side of the coin. They believe it's all biological and everything can be explained with, giving you medication and the right coping skills. That's not what the real problem is. I don't think that it's, and I've said this before, but I don't think that it's that addicts are in denial about they've got a problem. It's that they're in denial or they don't want what we're selling as recovery to this issue. Especially when recovery isn't even about being recovered at all. We have to realize that change is a sales pitch. And it's sold when it is believed that the profits of changing are better than the profits of not changing. Because whether we like it or not, an addict sees a benefit to what they are doing. They see a benefit to using. All you got to do is talk to them on a real level for a second and you'll figure that out. Again, pull away all the biology crap, pull away all the medical crap and the disorder talk and the disease talk, and you'll see that to an addict, there are benefits to what they do. And so the job is to convince them in a lot of ways, in my opinion, that there are greater benefits in other behaviors that are well worth it, and that are worth the time, the energy, and the investment. So with that being said, we need to understand that there are a few keys, if you will, to unlocking possibilities. And there are two words that I struggle with still, and that I think some people might be allergic to, if you will. But the two words are, patience, number one, and work, number two. Patience and work. You see, I believe too many addicts give up way too soon. When things don't happen in our timeline, well, oftentimes we throw up our hands and say, well, that's it, didn't happen when I planned for it to happen, and so it won't happen at all. That is ultimately what we believe sometimes. And I believe that the addict gets into serious trouble when they take the immediate moment, and this is what we're going to talk about in the next step when we get to it, but when they take the immediate moment and they expand it beyond just the immediate moment. But they take the immediate moment and expand it to the rest of their life and what that moment means for the rest of their life. So if something didn't happen today, then you're thinking, well, that means it'll never happen, or it won't happen tomorrow, it won't happen in a year's time. But an understanding of possibility and uncertainty in life is ultimately the antidote to that issue, because possibility will always say that it didn't happen today, but it very well could happen tomorrow. Possibility will also say, you gave up yesterday, but I was waiting here today to either give you that phone call or to present that opportunity, whatever it is you may be waiting for. So I think that we've been given the luxury of knowing the things that could ruin our possibilities for us. We know, for instance, that using or becoming addicted again would ruin any chance of us achieving the life that we may desire. However, on the other side of that, we have not been given the luxury of knowing that making a change will pay off in the way we would like. I believe that this is deliberate and even argue that this is the design of things. Um, it's, I believe it's that way to measure our motivation, to measure our level of commitment and our actual level of desire for whatever said changes that we're trying to make. And so part of the struggle here is being able to find meaning and purpose in the struggle. And if you're watching this and you're currently struggling with the addiction, then my plea to you is this: that you are already in a struggle. Some of you might even argue that life already sucks as it is. And getting clean and the process of doing that, the process of change, can be a struggle too. And sometimes it can definitely feel like it absolutely sucks. But I'm making the plea that you're already there, with your addiction and with what is required of you to maintain that. You're already at a struggle. You're already feeling the heat, if you will. And so my plea is that you start struggling, all right, for something different. Struggling for something good, struggling for something that actually has a good payoff and a good reward if you stay committed to it. And I think this is where we find meaning and purpose in that struggle, is just understanding that what we're struggling for now has a much better payoff. What we're struggling for now can reward us with the things that we would really like to have, whether that be freedom, a better life, mental independence. If you're going through custody battles, maybe you're talking about getting custody back. But once again, I'll reiterate, if you're dealing with an addiction right now, then you're already struggling. And so I'm just asking that you struggle for something that's worth it. And addiction isn't worth it. There's no, in my opinion, there's no real possibilities. There's no real, real hope for any kind of benefits from doing that. I had to figure that out on my own, from doing heroin. I had to ask myself the question: what more do I have to gain from engaging in that particular behavior? And I got eventually to a point where I had gained everything there was to gain. I had spent all my money, so I gained being broke. I'd ruined relationships, so I gained my loneliness. I struggled with withdrawal all the time, and so I gained a certain form of prison from that. And so I had to ask myself again, what more do I have to gain? I had experienced the high, and I knew what that felt like. It wasn't anything new anymore. And arguably, it barely ever happened anymore because, tolerance level gets way up there and it takes much more than it did before. And so you get to a point of where it's, as many of you might be able to relate to, it's not about getting high anymore. It's just about maintaining normal. And I'd rather maintain normal without that. This kind of normal is better than any normal day in addiction. And so it was a struggle to get here. It took a lot of work, but at the same time, I never shut out my mind to the idea of the things that were possible. But I had to balance that with the reality, right? For example, it wouldn't have been possible for me at the very beginning of this to be at a point like I am right now. And so I realized that, well, I'm in it for the long haul. And again, we're going to talk more about this one with step 9, so I don't want to ruin it all. But we need to be we need to be more open to the possibilities, because I'm telling you right now, the thing that is going to change the mind of the addict is getting them to believe in the possibilities of the change, not getting them to believe that they're diseased and disordered and screwed up. It's getting them to believe in the possibilities that are available to them from making this kind of change. All right, that's what's going to change the addict. So I encourage you to just, have the patience, and while you're being patient, put in the work, because the two go hand in hand. The more patient you are, the more work you put in, then the more possibilities open up for you. The more opportunities that become, visible to you is it's with time and it's with effort. And so I hope that we all take the time to be patient. The immediate moment is not the most important. It is not. We have a whole future in front of us that we need to be preparing for. And every action you take today is going to influence that future. And so we need to understand that, and we need to know that for certain. So, yeah, that's step 8 here. And if you get an opportunity, get on Facebook, follow the Facebook page, follow the YouTube. I got links to the material in the Facebook itself. And so just scroll through those posts and you'll be able to find it. Equally, there's a QR code that I put in the images as well. And so if you want to share this stuff with anybody and they have a smartphone, just find that QR code and have them scan it, and it will link them directly to the Facebook page. So that's what I got for you today. Everybody stay strong, stay hopeful. Even in this crazy world, there's still quite a bit to be hopeful about. And so if you're struggling with addiction here, again, over 90% of people get over this problem. And so it's totally possible that you do too. But those 90%, once again, they don't buy into the ideas of treatment. They don't buy into the ideas of disease and disorder. They do not buy into that. They do not follow it. They believe that they can go on after this problem and live a completely unadulterated life by substances. And millions of people do it. So you very well could be the next. So stay strong, stay in there. Until next time, we'll see ya.